So many different kinds of people, so many stories to be told, so many ways to say I love you. So tell somebody you don't know, 'cause we could all be gone by tomorrow.
Good evening, good morning, and good night, everyone. My name is Thomas Jones. I'm here with Greg Blaze, and this is episode 2, season 1 of Low Country Radio, coming live from Sullivan's Island, South Carolina, and Virginia. Greg, do you want to introduce yourself? Say hello.
Hello, everyone. This week I have a small batch whiskey from Newport News, Virginia, Ironclad bourbon whiskey, and I'm going to be sipping on it throughout the show this week.
Awesome. Greg, I know you've been doing a lot of research here. I know you have some topics you want to bring up on this week. Again, another crazy week here in the United States and around the world. A lot of precedents being set, a lot of just different things happening all over, whether it comes to the legalization of drugs in Washington, some amendments being passed through DC. It's crazy. So we have a lot to talk about here within the hour. So Greg, you want to start us off here with the first topic of tonight?
Yeah, sure. I'll start off with a topic that's been hot in the YouTube gun community this week. It's a bill that was filed in January 4th, I believe, at the very beginning of the new Congress, HR 127, filed by Sheila Jackson Lee. And the reason why it's been the hot topic is it's as they would put it, every gun owner's nightmare. Among these, it's in committee right now, hasn't passed anything, and in my opinion, I don't think it will. But we can go through some of the proposed changes to the law. For instance, there will be gun licensing, such as you have an antiques license, you'll have a military style rifle license, and there's their definitions are what you'd expect for those things. And every single you'd have to pay an $800 fee every year to have a gun for the first 5 years, and then every 3 years after that you'd have to re-up, and you'd have to pass a 24-hour training course. And
every 3 years?
No, every year for the first 5 years, and after 3 years I believe it changes.
Now this would be a federal regulation on weapons.
Yes, this would be federal. This is just a proposal. It has nothing's come of it yet, but it kind of lets as far as I'm aware, Sheila Jackson Lee has always submitted a new bill at the start of every Congress that, and typically they're kind of like something that people that enjoy guns as a hobby are very fearful of, because it's everything that they don't want. There's going to be quite a bit of pushback over this, but among the other things would be 24 hours of training and a psychological evaluation carried out by an AG certified psychologist. So, and if you violate any of these rules, the worst of which is a gun, the worst in terms of gun owners on these YouTube channels, in their belief, is the registration of guns. So you'd have a complete registry of every single gun owned, the serial number, the date purchased, which I don't really think that's gonna. I mean, a lot of these people have had guns for years. I don't think they're going to get an accurate date of when they purchased them, because it's, you own a 50-year-old gun that you've had for so long that you're not going to remember the day you purchased it. But that's besides the point. And it not only will it be a government registry for the approximately 450 million firearms in the United States that's registered, or not registered firearms, but not homemade firearms, because there has been quite a popular movement in the past few years wherever you buy an 80% lower, you mill it out, and you make your own weapon, which is perfectly legal as long as you do not transfer it to anyone else, or at least you're not with the intent to sell it. You are allowed to sell it later. That's just one of the things about law. But not only would this public registry be for government use, And gun owners, they fear that this is going to be used for confiscation of weapons. Well, that's the idea. But it would be a public registry of weapons, so everyone would know what guns you have, where you have them. And this is not for new guns. This is for like previously owned guns. So you'd have to register all of your guns through the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. And the penalties are quite severe for any violations of these light firearm licensing. So particularly they target modern military, what they call military style weapons. So if you violate them, the penalties, actually I have them right here, are if you knowingly violate the section 922 AA, you should be fined not less than $75,000 and not more than $150,000, in prison not less than 15 years and not more than 25 years, or both. Interestingly enough, the current minimum mandatory sentence for an armed robbery, simple armed robbery, not aggravated or anything like that, is 5 years. So this is very, very steep penalties. And among the things that you can get penalized for are transferring the firearms. So it says if you're going to transfer a firearm, even loan it per se, you have to contact your state AG. So if you go on a hunting trip with a buddy, you want to loan him a gun, it's not clear whether or not this would fall under this statute. Even ammunition, if you want to loan someone ammunition. So it's clear that this is the direction that House Democrats are intend on moving. I don't think this is going to pass. I do not think it will pass. However, I think something similar to this will pass, and I think they plan on, if that doesn't pass the House, through some sort of miracle, that the NRA finally does what it claims it does, protecting gun rights. A lot of the gun community don't think they do a good enough job for that of that, but they are also going to. I think they'll also, if that doesn't pass, I think that President Biden will, issue some sort of executive action, and somewhere along the lines of this. Nothing harsh like this, but it's going to be an attempt to go after military style weapons like ARs, AKs, AUGs, FNFALs, anything like that. And those were actually specifically outlined in this bill. It's only 19 pages long. I suggest if you have the time, going in and reading it. If you have any interest in the hobby of owning guns, hunting, anything like that, I suggest you go read it. Take a look at what some people are suggesting in terms of new gun laws. But yeah, I mean, it's a little worrisome that stuff like this gets suggested.
Do you have the name of the bill? I'm getting it up. Get it up and share it on the screen here right now.
It is HR 127. The short title is the act may be cited as the Sabika Sheikh Firearm Licensing and Registration Act. You can just type that up on Congress, on the congress.gov, and it should come up. And you can find, if you go under one of the tabs, it'll say text. You can just click PDF and you can. It's not a long read, not particularly dense either. But it goes after the typical targets of gun laws. It's going to be a very California gun law style restrictions.
All right, I'm going to share the screen here for people watching on YouTube here. Here we go. All right, so this is HR 127. Pretty interesting. Hopefully this is the right one. Let's look.
No, that's correct.
Okay. Yep. Perfect. This is kind of interesting. oftentimes we've seen actually in Western cultures, especially in the last 20 years, a lot of Western cultures have been going after the right to bear arms, and not just in the United States. But for one example, we'll talk about Australia. In Australia, they offer back a buyback program where any weapons that were previously bought could be turned in, and zero weapons in the entire country of Australia were bought back from the people. So I would find it very difficult for this to be passed.
I agree with you.
I think that there are major Second Amendment violations here. I'm going to stop sharing, but I'll scroll up here if you guys want to look. HR 127 is currently proposed. Pretty interesting stuff right there. My initial thought here, and this is so interesting because what I'm talking about right now, my constitutional law, is government overstep, especially federal government overstep into constitutional rights, right? And obviously this has a lot to do with the Second Amendment. Going after military style weapons, there are so many discrepancies with that. I beg the question, in New York State, for example, they have tons of regulations on AR-15s, right? That's one example of a military style weapon. You know what they do? I've fired an AR-15 in New York State. I've handled one. And it's insane. It's
But
not an
the
AR-15.
statute of limitations has passed.
Well, no. I'm going to explain it. It's not an AR-15. It's a 22 caliber rifle with the shell and the body of an AR-15. It doesn't even hold 25 round mags or 15 round mags. It holds 10 rounds, and they're 22s. And in order to even reload the weapon, you have to open up the top, unscrew it, open it up, pull a bolt out, and reload it one by one. The clip is almost like a part of the shell of the weapon itself.
You can't have a detachable magazine. Yeah, I've heard some of these.
I would find it very hard to believe that any right-wing senator or congressman, or any, even center right congressman would ever vote for this bill to pass. However, what a lot of times what they'll do is they will propose absolutely outlandish requirements in bills in order to kind of meet in the middle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a strategy.
I would find it would be almost impossible. They say there are more guns than people in the United States, and you quoted 400 million weapons. That's that we know of, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
There are more weapons in my house than there are people. Okay, so I would.
Where do you live, Tom?
Right, that's what I'm saying. There are so many issues with this. One, safety. Like, imagine this: you're a man. You're trying to get weapons illegally, and you have nothing to lose. You're already going to go commit violent felonies. You're going to go rob someone with a ton of weapons in their house. You know what I mean? You're going to go steal
exactly.
Weapons. There are just so many issues with this. What I don't remember what you said. I know you mentioned it, but I don't remember. What is the penalty for not registering your weapon? Do they say that?
Not registering is, I believe I had it up, shall be fined not less than $75,000 and not more than $150,000, imprisoned not less than 15 years and not more than 25 years, or both.
Okay, so what I see happening is a lot of people will be registering their hunting rifles, and a lot of assault weapons, quote unquote assault weapons, the scary 30-round mags AR-15s are not going to be registered. It makes sense for the ones you'd go out with, right? But if you're just shooting at the berm in your backyard, I mean, you don't need to register your AR-15. That's not legal. Yeah. That is not.
It's not a legal device. No, I just think that I think with that many firearms in the United States, I don't think they're going to get much compliance. It's not feasible, and you're basically relying on people's goodwill, essentially. There are some certainly wily types that will go out of their way to hide as much as they can, so I don't think that I think that this is one not feasible, and two, it's got some pretty glaring holes in it in terms of why would it be a public registry that doesn't, it kind of invites bad news, and and it's also not anyone else's business as to what you own. You know, it's, you know, you have a right to privacy for the most part, you know, unless you've committed a crime. But you know, making people felons overnight, it's just not my cup of tea. There are plenty of you know, law-abiding gun owners. You know, there's also plenty of people that are not law-abiding gun owners, unfortunately, and we've seen that. You know,
Is this targeting? You look at the bill, and you okay. They obviously think that there's an issue in the United States with weapons, right? That's why they
Yeah.
propose the bill. Okay. When someone,
Mhm.
you have to wonder what is the context behind it. They're not going after the people who are using weapons for malintent. They're not. They're going after the average American Joe, him and his son's rifle, going to take your kid out on a Saturday morning after school, and you're going to go shoot deer. You know, they're taking away the gun enthusiast weapons. They're not going after the actual people who are committing 99% of the gun crimes in the country, which are unregistered handguns. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't understand it. If you want to make it, it should be a violent felony to have an unregistered handgun. That would make sense to me. If you have
Mhm.
if you have a weapon and a handgun, especially that in a quote unquote gun-free zone, like that's fine. You can go after the criminals, go after the people who are using these things for ill will. But if you're going after someone who has a shotgun in their home for defense, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to me. I think that is crazy.
It doesn't, and I think that you know, they've seen success in, I think, New Zealand, but I think they forget that the culture of Americans is essentially, you know, for the most part, to say no to authority. That's how Americans operate. I wouldn't say as a whole, but you know, quite a few. You know, a certain distrust of authority is, I'd say, healthy, but you know, there's a point where it's too much. But for those kind of people that, you know, like that are gun enthusiasts, they're not going to like this, and I don't think you'll get any sort of compliance with this type of law. However, I don't think this is going to even pass. I don't even think
No
it's going
way.
to get out of committee.
It is a clear violation of the Second Amendment. I mean, the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And what does that bill sound like?
Sounds like a bit of an infringement. I'm going to be
Sounds
honest.
like they're being infringed. It doesn't take a constitutional scholar or someone with, you know, a PhD from Harvard or Yale or Williams to understand that. You know what I mean? That's not hard.
Yeah, it also gets to the heart of the matter where I think it was the Heller decision, DC versus Heller. I believe that's the case, where they, you know, essentially it was the Supreme Court, one half of the Supreme Court saying, the argument wasn't, oh, you can't have basic. So what happened was Heller wanted to own a handgun to defend, I believe it was a handgun to defend himself, and you know, whole legal scuffle over this, and the ultimate decision was the minority decision that didn't win. There, essentially, it was, you don't have the right to own a firearm in the first place. So that was the argument. So I think that's kind of deep down the belief of some of these people that are proposing these laws. You know, they can think that, but I don't. But it's going to be extremely unpopular, especially with the amount of guns that are being sold now. There's more new gun owners than there ever been in, I believe, in the history of the United States. You know, and record gun sales, probably due to the, you know, coronavirus. Everyone's gonna, you know, people like being prepared. You know, they're scared for their future and you know, their homes and everything like that, and they go out and buy guns, you know, as a way of, you know, feeling safe. And you know, if you are responsible, as you should be, with a firearm, then there is no reason that you shouldn't be able to own one, in my opinion.
I agree. I think it should be harder for people with mental incapacities to buy weapons. I think people who are
That is one of the things that's one of the things that's addressed in this bill. They you know, mandatory psychology, but they expressly prohibit anyone that's been in a inpatient you know, facility for depression or you know, all sorts of mental issues. But you know, but the thing is, that's a one size fits all, and I think life is more nuanced than that. I think there are people that get checked into these inpatient facilities, and maybe they're entirely cured, and I don't think that they should never be allowed to own a firearm in their life, because they're having issues when they're younger. I don't think by just blanket rules are always necessarily the best thing. I think that the minimal amount is the best, in my opinion, and this is the quite opposite of the minimal amount. And as a segue to what we're going to talk about next, it kind of goes the opposite of what they're doing with drugs, and particularly in Washington. I know you wanted to talk about that, and we've seen that many states are moving towards legalizing marijuana. It looks like Virginia, I know that may be looking at legalizing marijuana. And personally, I don't think it should be criminalized. I think it puts a lot of people in jail that really aren't violent criminals. I don't think, my personal opinion is I think if it's done too much, it makes you have no drive. And I think that the way it's done in Colorado, I dislike that personally, because they've had a campaign against secondhand smoke from cigarettes and everything like that, but they've kind of gone back to like everyone's smoking in public. That people go out to parks and they'll be smoking marijuana, and it's like it's good for you. You have a night off and enjoy yourself. And typically these are younger folks that that's my observation. That is not like a statistical thing at all. And they're going out and they're smoking in parks and in public and everything. Like, can't be done anything about it. It's a bit of a nuisance, to be honest. And I'm not a particular fan of it, but there's no reason that you should be put in jail over marijuana. It certainly has medicinal uses, but you'll see, like, the interesting thing is the federal government, there's a federal law against it, but essentially they're not enforcing it. So it seems like it's not necessarily going to be repealed at the federal level, but it will certainly be repealed in effect, because they're not enforcing it at all. So,
Washington is now, I had it wrong. Washington is now proposing to do the exact same thing.
Okay.
As Oregon, they're the ones
Oregon,
that first
okay.
in February to decriminalize the possession of drugs. Being a stark believer in human beings and human identity and human self, and very much against government regulation when it comes to certain things involving the individual. I think it's awesome. I think it's a major step in our country. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you put in your body. You are your own person. If you want to go do some LSD, go do some LSD. Go do it in the safety of your own home. You want to go, if you need to do some oxycodone, heroin, everything. Now, what it has done is decriminalize possession. I feel like it's a good step, but what they need to be doing is tackling the illegal drug manufacturing, right? In Portugal, for example, when the EU had just formed, Portugal kind of came in as kind of a weak chain in the whole EU when it came to drug use, and they had basically a drug epidemic. Everyone was using heroin, everyone was using methamphetamine. It was terrible. So what the government in Portugal did, they decided to legalize all drugs, decriminalize all drugs, and the police started going after the manufacturers. And what they started doing is, instead of these people who had to hide from their addictions, the Portuguese government started giving people avenues in order to get help from the government, in order to go into a government facility and help you get clean and figure out why you were doing this. Because in the end, all these major hard drug users, 99% of them have a history, and they have some reason. There's a reason why they need that heroin, they need that methamphetamine, they need that high or low. There's a reason why. The exact same thing happened in Switzerland. When you think of the Swiss, I think of a watch, and I think of how timely and how coordinated and how they are just so precision based, right? In Switzerland, they had a heroin epidemic, a huge one. They legalized heroin, and they made it, just like Portugal, made it very, very easy for people to go and get help. They gave people who are shooting up heroin safe place to do it. They handed out needles. HIV rates dropped, heroin use dropped, and people are starting to get into recovery. And Switzerland went from one of the highest heroin used nations in Europe to one of the least. And the exact same thing with Portugal. These people started committing less crimes. They started getting more help, and basically drug crimes disappeared throughout time. I think it's cool. I think it's really cool. I think that the FDA or ICE, not the FDA, ICE is one of the poorly, if you look at the amount of money that we put into federal organizations, when Ronald Reagan, or who was it, Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs. Who was it? I think it was Nixon. Richard Nixon, war on drugs. Yeah. Yes, it was. Okay.
Okay.
Nixon declared that drug use was public enemy number one. And this guy, what was he, a Quaker? I mean,
well, to be fair, 60s and 70s were a different time. We're looking at it
smoking pot.
Well,
like they weren't doing anything. They were scared because the pot was making them think in these communist ways, these perfect unities, perfect communities. That's what really they were worried about. But what I really want to say is that the war on drugs has been the number one hemorrhaging thing in the United States. If you see the amount of money that we put into it and the amount of return, it is the worst. The worst by far. And if you could take that into rehabilitation, I think we'd be a better country for it. But
I agree. I hadn't heard about Portugal or Switzerland.
Yep.
But part of me wants to disagree that, I think, okay, if we took the money that we're putting towards, preventing, just users of the drugs from, getting it, and instead put it towards helping them recover, I could get along with that very fine. But I don't particularly like the idea of making these drugs legal. I would much more prefer go after the real source of it. And I think that there's not been a great effort into cutting off the source as much. Floods in through the border, the drug smuggling. That's part of what the Coast Guard does. Is they they bring in these little submarines that have just drugs packed in them.
Oh yeah.
I see that I see your point. In the short term, I think that this could be very damaging. I think that there could be, it could lead people to taking up drugs. But in the long term, I see this possibly, benefiting, especially if what you say about Portugal and Switzerland is true.
It is the DEA. Just my whole thing is just, if I don't like to pay taxes. I think if you're going to pay taxes, they better be on the right things. And if you look at the amount of money we put into the DEA and the amount of return, it's despicable. I don't know what the right answer is. I think that all humans, especially Americans, especially people who in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, it says, that we are our own person. We have our own identity. It doesn't make sense for me for the government to regulate what you put in your body, especially if as harmful drugs like alcohol and tobacco are still wild. It doesn't make sense for me to regulate pot or shrooms or any of these things. So it's a cool step. Good for Oregon. I'm interested. I'm waiting with bated breath to see what happens. Who knows?
Hopefully it goes well. You always you see these particularly dubious things happening, and you hope it has the effect that they intend. But sometimes these things, sometimes actions have unintended side effects. So.
Right.
Hopefully it goes well. Hopefully this actually, in the long run, decreases drug use, decreases the heroin epidemic in the United States. Oxycodone, and the other hard drugs like that. Seeing people suffer from such addictions is painful.
So in Florida, where I went to high school, it's not decriminalized. Marijuana is not decriminalized throughout the whole state, but certain
Interesting.
cities have decriminalized it.
I see this becoming a pattern as where the state kind of backs off as to what they want to like enforce. You see it with the sanctuary cities, legalizing marijuana, and some of these places are claiming to be sanctuary counties, like, or sanctuary states in terms of gun laws and everything like that. We saw that with Virginia back in, I believe it was February, when there was a big gun rally. But I think that I think that a lot of these things, I think the states are just going to refuse to enforce, and unless there's quite a lot of political will from the federal government, I think that most of these states will kind of get away with doing what they want. In a way, it seems like we're kind of getting more, we're kind of coming full circle back to states' rights and everything like that. In a way,
It's awesome.
not in an outright way, but the states doing as they acting more autonomously. So we're going to see kind of like an interesting dichotomy as to what policies are put into place. I know that California and New York, they have very, very strict gun laws. Same with New Jersey, but who knows where this is going to go. I wish Oregon and Washington the best of luck. My first reaction is a little hesitant towards this, but we'll see where it goes.
It's interesting that the federal government, back in the day, the drinking age varied between state by state, right? And the federal government decided, okay, guys, 21 years old is the drinking age. And some states were like, go kick rocks. Okay. Yeah. So the federal government's like, what we're going to do? We're going to, not pay for your roads anymore. And the state's like, whoa. Okay. All right. We'll go up to 21, right?
You win.
Yeah. Okay. Whoa, our roads, you win. They're not doing that with marijuana.
I do find that interesting.
Very interesting. Like that to me, if I'm especially think about the marijuana bills that have passed through Republican governments, when Donald Trump was president, a lot of marijuana laws in states were being passed to decriminalize pot, and the federal government was not stepping in.
I do imagine that that Trump, had there been a bill to decriminalize marijuana, I do believe that he may have signed it. I think that he didn't really believe too much in the war on drugs. I don't think he would have gone as far as Washington, Oregon, and I don't think the country would go as far as Washington, Oregon. I think that a lot of people have their reservations about such.
Donald Trump, as good and bad as he did, I'll give him this. He said that it is up to states' rights on their approach to marijuana, which is what, in the end, all presidents should do when it comes to most anything. It should come down to states' rights.
Yeah, I think that I think that allowing the more local governments to kind of make these rules is for the better, because they're more responsive to the people. Because you're gonna, when you have say Texas, and Oregon, in the same legislative body, I don't think there's as much political will to get such things done.
Right.
But allowing the state to be more responsive to the people, allowing these local governments to be more responsive to the people, I think that's kind of what where I like things being, because you can always call your local representative, because there's not that it's easier to organize on the county level, the state level,
right,
than it is to organize on a national level. And if your state typically has very similar morals and beliefs, it tends to be that way. Obviously there's quite the diversity throughout a state, but it ends up being kind of one way or another in terms of.
It is such an interesting topic, and it is one of my favorites in the whole world, is to think about how governments run. And it's why I love Canadian like history so much, Canadian politics, was because I've always been infatuated with how the Canadians have run their system of government and their setup with ridings and how much power their provinces have. And hopefully now, and I don't think with the bill that we were just talking about, the HR
127.
127, I mean, you can see here is again a more federal approach, right?
Mhm.
I think a well-run United States, I think that I wish a lot of people, across the aisles would agree that, what's good for Texas isn't necessarily good for Vermont. And what's good for Vermont is not necessarily good with Texas. I
Yeah,
think that
no, I agree.
there needs to be obviously some federal laws, but hopefully as we realize that there's this gridlock going on in the country of some of these bills that are just kind of like a blanket statement over this huge nation of ours, this massive, like if you look at the United States on a map, like we're the size of Europe. Like you can cram Europe in there and some. It doesn't
Yep.
make sense. It does not make sense to me that 150 talking heads get to decide what's good for the whole country. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Hopefully, we can kind of figure out that these state governments are a little bit better run.
Really, what I hope for the country is that the federal government sees what the entire country wants. For instance, COVID relief, like
Yep.
Bailout for small businesses, not like, and I hope they like see that and everyone wants to come together and do that. And it doesn't seem to be the way because it's a game of politics, and unfortunately, politics ruins everything.
True.
I don't think, I think one of the promises, I don't know if it was a promise, but I think one of the things that was said was Joe Biden was going to, President Joe Biden was going to push for the $2,000 stimulus checks. But currently we have an impeachment trial going on.
Yep.
As our previous president, Donald Trump, was impeached. There's a current trial going on. And as far as I'm aware, nothing can be passed until that is resolved. So quite frankly, when people are in their neediest, nothing's going to be done. And it's unfortunate. I think it's a little tone deaf. Move on is kind of, you want to, what the goal should be is to move forward in a positive direction instead of dwelling in the past. It seems at this point it's a game of politics, and they don't.
It's very petty.
It comes off as petty. I don't think that this is a wise move, and I think that there's other more productive things that could be done. And I think that I believe that Chuck Schumer was.
I don't even know if it's constitutionally correct to impeach a president that's no longer sitting.
That is the current question. It's
the number one
because he was.
I don't think it is.
Well, so essentially what they did was they impeached him before he left office.
Right, but now he's out.
But their trial is currently, and so the question is whether or not the language says removal and or disbarment from office. And so the question comes down to if you have to have removal first to have disbarment. And I think that's going to be one of the arguments that's brought up. And I just wish that people would come together. They would try and do good for the country. And I don't think that's what a lot of people in Congress do. I think that they would like to have things come their way and pretend like they're doing good for the country, and in reality they're not. I've expressed my discontent with the Congress already, and in the first episode, and I don't think it's going to change unless something major happens where they decide that they actually want to move forward in a bipartisan manner. I think the idea is if you do something bipartisan, that means everyone wants it, right? In theory, it's not always that way, because they did pass that $600 relief check. But the theory is that everyone should want that. I think that when they did the $600 relief check, that was a far cry from what was needed. And so we'll see what happens. You know, and we also have the issue where there was during the you know, Joe Biden as president is calling for unity, and you know, that's good. I like that. But it, to me, it seems more as a more of a, just like saying like a political speak, because there are a bunch of the conservative or the right wing section of the country. You know, as we talked about earlier, the country is very divided. You know, the smart thing to do would be throw them a bone. You know, do something that everyone agrees on, and you'll actually win people over that way. But it doesn't seem to be what Congress is doing. It doesn't seem to be what the president is currently doing, because they're moving forward. This partly may be due to the impeachment, but they're moving not on Joe Biden per se, but they're moving forward with the impeachment, and you know, nothing can be done. They're obviously dwelling on the previous president, and the speak this, talking about, like, you know, radical libertarians, I believe is one of the terms that's being thrown around, or you know, it doesn't do anything for the discontent that, you know, that arose out of the happenings at the Capitol on January 6th. You know, the media calls it insurrection, more riot than anything. Just a, you know, very, very misplaced riot. And you know, unfortunately, people have lost their lives. Like I believe it was Officer Sicknick was his name, DC officer. And the great irony of all that was he was in fact a Trump supporter. You know, you know, it's not, it's, as I say, it's unclear as to whether or not he died as a cause of it, but he did die like after the riot. So you know, people are it's assumed that it is the cause. But it's just, you know, it's sad. I think the best way to do this would be to do something that everyone agrees on, like, you know, COVID relief checks, you know, trying to get the economy rolling with the relief of small businesses, some sort of opening of the country in a meaningful way, while also doing it. You can be smart and open the country in a meaningful way. I like rollout of more vaccines in order to facilitate this. That is going very well, as I've heard. But you know, I don't. Do you have any comments on that?
I don't. I was gonna, before we move on to our last two segments of the show, I was gonna ask you. So remember the Dogecoin and the GME?
Oh yes.
So
yes.
I'm not sure. Some people who listen to the show probably don't understand everything that happens. And then after, you know, Wall Street kind of fought back, it's kind of been hush hush. I'm not sure whether that's media control or whatever. Do you have any more info on that?
Yeah, I do. Apparently, this is as claimed by Robinhood.
And Robinhood is the site where
yeah.
the people used in order to buy and sell the stocks. And basically the concept of Robinhood is to let any average Joe be able to be a day trader, essentially.
Yes. What they call it is retail trading. When you're not a large hedge fund or a large firm, you're a retail trader. And it was, I've heard, you know, the idea was that all these retail traders were driving the buying of these stocks. They were angry over, as a recap, they're angry over the fact that GameStop was going to be shorted. Someone let it slip that they're going to short GameStop, and they just had someone on the board that was planning on revamping, and they felt like it was probably criminally undervalued, as they would probably view it. But they decided to do a short squeeze, which is essentially when you short a stock, you borrow a stock from someone, typically a large institution. You borrow a stock and say, I'll pay you, I will get you the stock back in X amount of time. You sell it to someone, and then expecting it to go down, you say you sell it for $20. You expect it to go down, it goes down to $8. You buy it back at $8, and you give it back to the institution you borrowed it from, and you get about $12 in profit that way. So the idea is that it adjusts for an overvaluation of the company. What happened was there was it became the most traded stock on Robinhood, or on the stock market, excuse me. And the next day, the ability to buy the GameStop stock was prevented. You can only sell your position. The issue with this is that automatic sales, when the price drops, automatic sales happen, and it actually dropped over 60% after that had happened, and it went back up. But people felt like this was an attempt to help out the hedge funds that were being targeted. And as Robinhood later claimed, that they were actually, the reason why was because these trades actually don't happen automatically. It goes through an automatic clearinghouse payment, which is the same payment that your credit card bills are paid in. And so in order to, because there was so much volume, they had to put larger and larger amounts down as insurance on these. Typically, it's taken on pretty much faith that these are gonna be executed. Right. But because of volume and the volatility, larger and larger amounts were having to put down, and so as a result, they stopped the ability to trade because it was getting too much for them. They didn't have enough capital to be able to make these trades. The problem with that was that they didn't communicate that fact. Some people don't. There's people that don't believe that. Obviously, there's great distrust over hedge funds and these large financial institutions that probably stem back to the 08-09 financial crisis, where they're giving out subprime loans, and that pretty much really never got resolved because they basically said, "Oh, the government was making us do it. We're going to wash our hands of this," and no meaningful, nothing truly meaningful came from that. And there was the Occupy Wall Street movement that came from that. But so there's people that this was not just a right thing. This was not just a left thing. It was people that were just annoyed at the hedge funds making money on killing these companies. Because essentially what happens is when they short it, it triggers an automatic sell from traders, and it goes down further, and then they can basically bankrupt these companies. What's been done is this gave GameStop and the 13,000 I believe employees more time, essentially.
Nice.
So that's the ultimate that's the ultimate end to this. The stock has dropped back down to like $50. So it seems to be everything's normally like leveling out, but I don't think this is going to be the only time something like this happens. People have expressed their distrust and dislike of these large hedge funds, and this could mean some instability in the stock market in the future. Hopefully not, because you don't want your investments your retirement funds going down, but sometimes things like these happen.
So we'll talk about sports. The only thing I really have, obviously the NHL, they're on. Only a few games have been canceled because of COVID, but it makes me want to kind of talk about sister or brother league, which would be the NBA, because most of these teams share arenas and their schedules are often, they mirror one another. Okay, the NBA has decided to hold an all-star game, which I think is crazy, because if you're trying to limit the exposure of players and the exposure of one-on-one on players, there's nothing more one-on-one than the NBA All-Star game. And the reason why they're doing this is because of, advertisers. Really, All-Star games are just for kids and advertisers. So I think that's kind of crazy. I think that could maybe, imagine one guy in this NBA All-Star game, two guys have COVID, all the superstars in the league are going to be out for 2 weeks minimum.
Yep.
I think it's bananas. And obviously, I'm not a fan of the NBA. I don't like what the NBA does with China. Anyone who's pro-China, I'm not for. And the NBA is
Yep.
vocal on how much they love the Chinese government and everything going on in China. So don't really endorse.
It's
It'll be interesting to see
it's
what happens with them. I wish all those players really good health and everything, but it's crazy to me that they're hosting an all-star game. It's nuts.
it's China does have quite the influence over a lot of these
Oh yeah.
entertainment, a lot of the entertainment, just specifically because they're a large market. And I think people, Disney, I think they filmed Mulan over there.
Mm-hmm.
Milan is a place in Italy, excuse me. And
The movie. Yeah, they filmed the movie Milan over there.
yeah, and I think there was some controversy over that because they were, they were in the area where the I don't know if this is I don't know if talking about China is a particularly wise thing to do, because might get a censor or two. But the Uyghurs, certainly we're not going to be big in the China market after this, but the Uyghurs are being systematically removed from the society, and
Right.
Essentially what they're doing is an ethnic cleansing of, and they want the entirety of the Chinese.
It's a nerfed Holocaust.
It pretty much is. It's not reported on.
It's insane.
And
it's insane
it's
what's going on in China.
And I think part of the reason why it's not, getting the attention that it does is because they do such a good job of controlling their media. They don't let things out that they don't really want out. It's truly sad. I mean, the fact that they're trying to eliminate every single ethnicity, Tibet, the whole Free Tibet movement, they're trying to eliminate essentially every ethnicity that isn't the Han Chinese. So,
what does that sound like to you?
Soon, it sounds like the Holocaust to me, but I don't, the numbers.
The phones, and people are, and Biden, and I don't want to get back into politics, but one of my biggest things with the Democrats right now is how pro-China they are. And we are going to look back 20 years, 30 years from now, and we're going to go, holy crap.
I don't think it's the Democrats either. I think it's the Republicans as well. The Chinese know they can't win an outright war, but they're very willing to do subversive tactics. So allowing manufacturing to move to China is directly benefiting them. In my opinion, buy American. You're getting quality. Typically, well, I won't say you're getting quality, but typically it's very high quality, and you can take pride in the fact that you're employing another American, and even if you pay a little bit more, you're paying for the pride of buying in your country, the pride of employing another American to do the work. And typically the warranties are much better because they actually care about their product, because that's how it is. In China, they like there is quite the knockoff, kind of cottage industry. If you go on, I've noticed more and more on Amazon that quite a few of the products are cheap Chinese knockoffs. Essentially,
AliExpress or Alibaba.
Yep, Alibaba is the perfect example, because you can make a great amount of money. What you do is you say, I'm going to buy this product from Alibaba, and I'm going to sell it under my name, and it's basically the same. You're selling the same thing as everyone else, but you get a ton of money. It's pretty incredible. And these aren't necessarily like Chinese sellers. It's people that they know how to play the game. You buy something Alibaba, and you sell it on Amazon, and you can make quite a bit of money. It's I've been told that this is I know someone that recommended doing this, and I was like, I can't do this in good conscience.
It's crazy to me. Okay, so that's sports, NBA.
Well, we didn't talk about the.
Okay.
Of course.
I forgot. The 8th of February. Get ready for the 8th of February, where Tom Brady takes on Patrick Mahomes and his Kansas City Chiefs. I think Tom Brady, I hope he cements his dynasty as one of the greatest winners of all time in team sports.
I do as well.
It'll be sick.
I think we talked about this last time, but kind of sticking it to the Patriots
It'd be awesome.
would be awesome.
Sheldon Fruit.
Again, sorry to our Boston fans.
Yeah.
But he's a very, very good quarterback, and it would cement his place as the greatest of all time.
Like maybe the greatest of all sports. You know what I mean? Like, I take it back, Wayne Gretzky. But
Wayne Gretzky, I was about to say, are you sure Wayne Gretzky's there?
I'll always argue Wayne Gretzky. But there are even people in the hockey community, and I think this is insane, who think Wayne Gretzky wouldn't even be that good if he played in the NHL now. And I think that's crazy to me, because the guy, even if you take away all of his goals that he ever scored, he would still lead the NHL in points by a player. So like by not a little, by like a lot. So okay, that's all I'm saying. All right, so go on. Greg and I thought it would be awesome if we ended each show with a college story. We both went to college together. Greg had one in mind about one of our first trips to Ottawa together as a group. Greg, you want to start?
I'll kick it off. So this was, I believe this is the junior year.
Yep.
And I had just fixed a car. It's a 2000 P38 Range Rover. I bought it secondhand, and I was quite proud of the fact that I had fixed it, and I brought it up to school with me after winter break, because I was, I drove up to school every time, and I wanted to be on my own, have a car up there with me. So, and I was quite proud of the fact that I'd fixed this. The thing about the P38 Range Rovers, the Mark IIs, is they have their quirks. They have, electrical gremlins, as with everything British. And they also have an interesting setup for the suspension. It's an airbag suspension that automatically pumps air to level the car. Essentially, instead of a spring, it's an airbag that inflates and deflates and raises and lowers the car. And this was, this is on modern cars as well. Jeeps, current Range Rovers also have this. If you ever drive by one on the highway, they're typically lower than you see when they're driving on surface roads. But it was kicked off in that model, the Mark II, and as a background, and it's got quite a bit of, it had quite a bit of bugs, quirks. If it had any issue, what it would do is it would automatically deflate all the way and then ride on the bump stops. Basically, there was no suspension to the car. It was like these little bits of closed cell foam, or this much closed cell foam was between you and the tires on the road. And so, we go up to Canada. I believe it was for your birthday.
Yep.
You got a birthday coming up. Happy birthday, by the way. We drive up to Canada, have a nice weekend, celebrate his birthday, the typical college stuff. And on the way back, I'm driving back with my two roommates. I believe it was Parker and Gregor. And typically, and we're about 15 minutes out. We're kind of out on the outskirts of Ottawa, and all of a sudden I hear the dreaded noise, and it does 3 beeps. It goes bop bop bop, and then it just lowers itself. And the thing about Canadian roads in the middle of winter is they're not smooth. No. So I was like, oh dang. And I had oversized tires on the car too, so it wasn't like I couldn't drive because it would wear on the inside of the fender. And so I couldn't drive, and so I was like, oh my god, we have to turn around. We have to spend another night in Canada. And
oh no,
if you've ever driven in a car that doesn't have suspension, it's like getting punched in the kidneys.
And we drove roads in Ottawa, which they do a fine job, but it's not fantastic.
It's we got off the highway onto a surface road because we had to turn around.
Oh man, that's
And the worst part about so I forgot to mention that the worst part about this was there's a computer to reset it. And in my exuberance, I in wanting to drive my car, I left it at school. It was in my mailbox. It was waiting for me, and I hadn't picked it up. And now it's like, oh my God. And I'm like, we're gonna have to turn around. We're gonna have to go back. And we're driving on the surface road, and there's probably a good 2-inch dip every 20 feet. And I just remember looking in the rear view mirror and just seeing one of my roommates' heads hit the ceiling from the bumps, because having no suspension to hit these bumps and going a reasonable speed, because it's a surface road. I can't drive 10 miles an hour. People will be honking their horns and everything like that. He just hit the ceiling with his head. And so we turn around, we go back, and we get back on the highway, and I'm driving 40, blinkers on, I'm trying not to wear out the inner fender of the car. And we arrived back, and we had quite a nice day. I believe that was did we go to the sushi place? You want to talk about the sushi place?
Yeah. So there's a sushi joint. It's 601 Sushi, I think is the name of it, or 610 Sushi.
Great place. Should definitely go there.
Is that they give you iPads and it's unlimited sushi. So you click on this iPad and you say, whatever I want, you're going to bring it to me. And I'm not stopping until I'm ready to stop. And you're not allowed to leave any food on the plate, or else they'll charge you extra, like a couple bucks per roll or for whatever you have left. So it's 4 hungry, tall athletes, who could literally eat you out of house and home in a day, at this sushi joint. And it's like a Sunday, and there's no one there, and it's just us. And I think it was cheaper than what it would typically be. And we started eating. And I think we were there for about a good hour and a half until they.
I think it was 2 hours. We
2 hours.
So it was 2 hours. We had ordered probably upwards of in terms of slices over into the hundreds.
We ate out a small Japanese village of food. I mean, it was so much. There was so much food that we had consumed, and they started getting slower and slower and slower at returning our food and bringing it to us. And what was it? One of us we ordered a bunch. It was maybe there for 2 hours, and someone ordered a ton of food out of nowhere, and it comes up, and it was kind of backlogged. And out of all of a sudden, a sushi boat worth of rolls come out. And I remember looking at that and thinking I could never eat another roll in my life, but we somehow conquered it.
I think they cut us off. I think they just stopped giving us food, and we're like, okay, it's time to pay up. That's our calling. And the best part of it was, it was kind of in a buffet format, if I recall, and it was 15 bucks Canadian, and you're
so cheap.
It was there's, in terms of valuation of money, there's a U.S. currency, there's monopoly money, and then there's Canadian money, and you're this is the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah, it was. The Canadian dollar treated us really well when we were in college. It was going through some troubling times.
It honestly made me feel better about the fact that I had done something so foolish, and we left with you the next day, and I had to come back up and get that car, and I had when I was going through customs on the way back after I picked it up the next weekend. It took me 10 minutes to get it fixed. Is the worst part. I'm driving an hour and a half, and then plugging it in, doing 10 minutes, and then it's good to go. And it was probably 11, close to 12, and the border guard at the United States goes, so what were you doing? And I was like, oh, I was picking up a car. And he goes, excuse me? I'm like, uh-oh, wrong thing to say. I shouldn't have said that.
Bad verbiage.
Bad, you're 12 o'clock, and you're oh my God, I'm 30 minutes from the school, I can just go to sleep. And he goes something along, because they can tell when your car comes in and out of the country. And I'd left the country, I'd left the car in the country, and so that probably looked mighty suspicious to him. He goes, he goes, I was like, well, it's a really, really long story. Like, do you want to listen to it? And he goes, I'm here all night. I was like, okay. And I was like, all right. So basically, like, I have this car. I really like it a lot. You know, it's got its quirks. And I ran through the whole story, and like 10 minutes later, he's like, okay, you can go. I was like, okay, thank you, thanks. That was my experience with driving an old 2000 Range Rover up to Canada.
They're professional ball busters, the U.S. Custom guys. Not as bad as the Canadian ones, but no disrespect, but they are pros at what they do.
They do not have a sense of humor. Let's put it that way.
No, they do not. They do not. They do not. They always assume you're there for the worst. But yeah, we had a lot of good times at that house in Ottawa. I'll never forget. Was that the birthday? Was that the birthday where we had the keg?
I don't believe so. I think that was. Oh, there was everyone there. It was like Rob Ryan. Shout out to Rob Ryan.
I remember we split up into groups that birthday night, and some of us were going to go partake in more activities, and some of us were going to go home. And I had this 90-something-year-old neighbor named Burl, and gosh, she was such a sweet old lady, but I'm sure the last thing she wanted to be was next to, you know, a bunch of college students, right? But I mean, it was one night in a blue moon, and I remember that we had gotten a keg for that birthday, and I told everyone, I said, look, and we had a hot tub out back in this backyard, and I said, look, don't go outside and be loud and obnoxious. Don't, like, whatever you do, because I was going to go partake in the extracurriculars. Whatever you do, don't go be loud and obnoxious, okay? Please don't. They're like, yeah, no problem. Anyways, we go and do whatever we were doing. I come back, and Boscow is this mystic figure. He's like a Disney World like lumberjack. If Disney designed a lumberjack, he's huge. He's this big.
He's essentially a Sasquatch. If the Sasquatch was more human than he was ape.
Yep, that's pretty good one on Boscow. This intelligent Sasquatch. And I remember coming home, and the way the house was set up is that through the front door, I can see the backyard, and I can see the hot tub. And I remember I can see him, his arms reached out in front of the hot tub, people running around outside in just their underwear, and him sitting there with the keg and nursing it like a cat drinking milk from the tit. And I was so upset because they were obviously not listening to what I had said. And I think the next weekend I had gotten a nice letter from the police saying that there was a noise complaint and all that. But still great. That was a great. That was a good.
It was a lot of fun, regardless of the fact if I had to leave my car up in Canada.
That was a good one. That was a fun birthday. I think, man, I'm really trying to think what happened. Did we go to the Cross that night?
Oh, of course, went to the Cross. We always went to the Cross. We'll save the Cross for another time. The Cross is an enigma.
About the Cross. Rest in peace, the Cross on Elgin. Wonderful bar. Got hit.
Best place I've ever been.
Man, one of the best dive bars in the world, and truly a gem in Ottawa. I don't think anyone other than friends, I don't think anyone else would say that, but truly a gem. Truly a gem. Right next to the 24-hour diner and right next to the best place to get tacos in Canada. I mean, it was the best. You could go to the Cross, and I'm not going to tell you any Cross stories, but typically we'd go and get dinner at the taco joint, then go to the Cross, which is right next door, and then afterwards, after hours of drinking and being jolly and merry and singing, because the place had the best stage for singing, and they just grab instruments and just go up, start playing them. Anyways, so much fun. We go to the diner and get food and knock out, 3 a.m. the next day. But that was a great time.
We'll save some of those for next time. I think we're revealing too much of our
so many stories in Ottawa. That's just one of many. I just want to thank you guys. I'm sure Greg wants to thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, remember you can find us on Spotify at Low Country Radio, and you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Low Country Radio. We really appreciate the support. Share it with your friends. If you really, the whole concept of this podcast is just get people's voices out there. So if you have anything you want to talk about, anything you want to discuss, if you want to come on and be a guest and just chat with us and share a story of your own, please come and do it. We'd love to hear from you. Greg, do you want to say anything?
That's all for this Friday. I believe it's the February 4th. That's all we got for this week. We'll see you next week.
Thanks a lot, guys. Hey, have a good night. Have a good day wherever you are listening to this. Be safe. Thanks a lot.